Thank you and welcome back, everyone. We're now going to the midday session of our seminar, and on the agenda now is the platform economy, which will be presented by Ridwaan Boda, as well as let me check, Rakhee Dullabh, right? I've got it right. Done it right. Thank you. Just to give you a brief explanation of who they are. Ridwaan is an executive in the corporate commercial department, where he heads up the technology, media, and telecommunications team. He's also a member of the United Nations Global PAS panel of international data and privacy experts. Ridwaan has considerable experience and expertise in the TMT arena, having worked and advised on some of the largest and most prominent information and communication technology transactions in South Africa. Rakhee Dullabh is an executive in the Technology, Media and Telecommunications Department. She specializes in technology, data privacy, cybersecurity, electronic communications, outsourcing, information technology, advertising regulations, social media, and broadcasting. Welcome to both of you, and we look forward to a very informative session. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for having us here today. Rakhee and I are delighted to be speaking to you today about the platform economy. I think this is something very topical, not just it's been quite relevant and topical for a long time now. And in the future, I think virtually every single business is going to have to ask themselves, how do we involve ourselves as a player in the platform economy? In today's discussion, we'll start off with some of the basics of what do we mean by the platform economy, and then we'll go into a tale of two business models, your traditional business model as opposed to platform business models. Rakhee will then go into issues, can traditional businesses embrace platforms, and also strategies to enter the platform economy. Thereafter, between Rakhee and I, will cover a whole host of issues which arise from the platform economy, including digitization, digital marketing, employment, mergers and acquisitions and joint venture issues, tax and structuring, technology contracting and IP, data privacy, competition, regulatory, consumer protection. So as you can see, the myriad of legal issues which affect the platform economy is quite significant, and there's quite a lot of issues. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by the platform economy? I think if you look at the world's largest companies, the top 10 companies in the world, 7 of the top 10 companies in the world are actually all platform-based businesses. If you look at a number of companies in South Africa, all of the telcos, most of the large banks, and a number of other players in the market are actually have stated very publicly and very openly that their intention is to move from being a product-based business towards a platform-based business. That's where we'll start with a really great quote from Harvard Business Review, and I'm going to read it out to you. There's a lot to it, but I think this gives a good feel for what the platform economy is about. So in a product business models, firms create value by developing differentiated products for specific consumer needs, and they capture value by charging money for those items. Conversely, in a platform business, firms create value primarily by connecting users and third parties. They capture value by charging fees for access to the platform, and platform models bring a shift in emphasis from meeting specific customer needs to encouraging mass market adoption in order to maximize the number of interactions, or from product related sources or of competitive advantage, such as product differentiation. I won't go into read the rest. At its heart, what the platform economy is about, it's the shift from a very traditional linear business model towards more of a platform-based model. If you think of your banking app as a very early example of a platform economy play, traditionally a banking app would give you access to your banking services. But if you go into your banking app, you'll find that most or the larger banks would offer you the ability to purchase electricity, the ability to purchase airtime, the ability to purchase these days even things like movie tickets and a whole host of other things. If you start to grasp this concept, it's about brands, significant brands, adding to their product range, but products not necessarily created by themselves, but rather third-party products, which they actually then offer to their consumers. Next slide, please, Rakhee. The platform economy, and before I get to basically what the differentiated personal business models are, if you think of everyday examples of platform economy players, there's Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, Alibaba. But if you think of your bank, if you think of your telco company, these days they offer a lot more services than just plain banking services or telecommunications services. If you think of a retailer such as Walmart or even Macro these days, Macro now not only stocks their own products which they purchase or procure, but they actually grant any third party with a product to sell access to their platform, the ability to load their products onto the Massmart or Walmart platform, and the ability to then sell on to consumers. So these are great examples of companies leveraging technology to be able to offer multiple and new products to their customers. In a traditional, next slide, please, okay. In a traditional business model, a traditional business model is quite linear. So a producer produces specific information or specific products and services, and the producer then passes or sells it on to the consumer. However, a platform-based model is very different. It creates value by encouraging interaction. So think of a hotel chain, Marriott Hotels versus Airbnb. Airbnb were able to onboard 1 million rooms quicker than Marriott Hotels was able to in their 50-year history. So the ability to scale very quickly, the ability to be able to bring products to the market, all enabled by digitization. This is what the platform economy actually deals with. Say a comment Meta and no longer Facebook. Facebook still is a brand. Meta is just the name of the holding company, much like how you have Alphabet, the holding company of Google. So just to clarify that. But coming back to a tale of two business models, if you look at traditional business models, traditional manufacturers such as a car maker is involved in manufacturing motor vehicles. Traditional businesses such as a hotel chain is involved in developing hotel properties, either through leasing it and then developing specifically for hotel purposes, or building a fresh new property and then creating a hotel out of that specific property. A platform business, on the other hand, is very different. Airbnb doesn't own any hotels. It actually enables third parties to live, or it enables platform players to leverage off existing products or new products which are coming to the market. Next slide, please, Rakhee. So looking at this, the typical distribution of a traditional pipeline business model, a production company would produce goods. It would then be involved in distribution and marketing of some sort, and ultimately the consumer then would be the ultimate purchaser. A platform ecosystem is quite different. It's not as linear. It's not as straightforward, but it enables producers and consumers to interact, exchanging feedback through facilities, etc. Later on, we'll speak about some of the technologies behind it, like artificial intelligence and cloud computing and other technologies which actually enable the platform economy. But at its heart, if you think about your bank as, again, the most basic example of a platform player, the ability for your bank to leverage their brand name and to be able to sell you products from third parties, that's a great example of a platform economy play. Next slide, please, Rakhee. So those are that's just a very brief and basic introduction to the platform economy. Throughout the course of the discussion, it will probably become much more clear to you if you haven't already come across this concept before. I'll now turn over to Rakhee, who will speak to you about whether traditional businesses can actually embrace platforms. Rakhee.
Thanks, Ridwaan. And hi, everyone. Yes, I think just a consideration is that, platform economy businesses just exist. And so many organizations may feel like, how are they going to embrace this new platform economy and be part of this disruption that's taking place in the market? So there are ways in which they can do this. So, I mean, the common players in the space have been, those organizations that have modern business models. They're innovative, they're disruptive. So, the famous examples of Uber and the like and Airbnb, where they took a very traditional concept and they turned it on its head. So they were able to do that at the outset because that was what their organization was after. But if you're a more long established and traditional business, you don't have to be left out. It's not that, now it's too expensive for you to go back and change your entire business model. That is not what is needed in order for you to be part of this ecosystem. So if you find yourself to be a more traditional business model, these companies can either create their own platforms. It really is never too late. So use existing infrastructure to create a platform where you can allow other collaborators to be part of this platform economy and ecosystem, to sell more than just your own products to consumers and bring this value and this interaction between all of these consumers and manufacturers, developers, and creators. Alternatively, you can become part of another platform's ecosystem by leveraging existing platforms to your own advantage. So it's not to say that just because you haven't already done it, you can't move forward. There are many examples of, existing organizations that have sought to do this. For example, in the manufacturing industry, I know one of the car manufacturers sought to leverage existing platforms to be part of it. One of the most famous examples that we'll turn to look at is actually the example of Walmart. So Walmart, as you may know, is similar to a macro type business where they have, huge warehouse type premises where they sell lots of different products. And they had a traditional pipeline business model. And they were able to grow and change into a more of a platform business and through various acquisitions. So what they did was in 2016, they purchased Jet.com, which is obviously, an e-commerce platform. And then in 2018, they invested in a startup called Flipkart. And this actually resulted in their stock being quadrupled from 15 million to 60 million. So it really bore fruit very quickly for them. What they were able to do is they were able to create and develop a system that allows sellers to plug into its existing platform of Walmart.com and then sell their goods, so these other parties' goods, to Walmart's masses of customers, because that is the benefit. Many of these very large organizations who have existing traditional businesses have access to a database, to a consumer base that startups and innovators don't. And so there's this potential of bringing more value to your existing customers, keeping them within your ecosystem, but giving them what they need as well, more than what you can offer. For Walmart specifically, the benefits it created included that Walmart didn't have to have inventory items, so they didn't actually have to stock all of the products that they were displaying on their website. They didn't have to carry the risk and the cost that comes with having these extra products being displayed on its website. The sellers themselves got to participate in a global trade, so they obviously benefited, and there was access, to a broader customer base. And the sellers themselves could fulfill own orders or rent their own infrastructure to enable all of this to take place. And I know there never seems to always be this, but this was a true win-win-win situation. It was a win for Walmart, it was a win for all these new sellers, and it was a win for the consumers because they were able to really come to a one-stop shop. So Walmart is a prime example of someone that came in very early on and was able to, build and leverage this, what we now call platform economy. So what are the different strategies that you can embrace in entering the platform economy? So, we've broadly spoken about this, but I think it's a good idea for you to see this picture to understand the different role players in the ecosystem of a platform economy. So right at the top in the blue bubble, we have the platform provider. And this is the party that has the infrastructure. Mostly, they also have the customer base, and they're going to set up this platform on which everything is going to happen. Behind the scenes, so in the black bubble, we have technology service providers that are going to support this platform. So everything from, cloud service providers, your AI technologies, cloud hosting service providers, and the like. So various kinds of technologies that might underpin the platform. You then, on the green, if you're looking on the right, you would have your app developers, and you can call them what you like, or sellers, app developers, but they are essentially the people who own the products and services and that want to offer them on the platform. And most traditionally, they are products. I haven't as yet seen services, but I'm sure it would evolve to that stage. You then have the end user or customer. And obviously, this is the person that's going to consume the product. And lastly, and never to forget, we always have regulators and enforcement authorities who we have to be aware of and ensure that we operate, in a lawful manner. So this would be the ecosystem of the platform economy. And bear this picture in mind as we go through the legal risk, because that is why you will see there are so many legal considerations, because there are so many players in a platform economy. So some of the strategies that you can look at, and I've touched on them earlier, but we'll go into a little bit more detail as to how do you actually enter the platform economy. So the Harvard Business Review actually suggests 3 ways to take your traditional business from pipe and go to platform at your own pace. So the first is to use what's already available. So many of you have existing infrastructure systems that have the capability to support a platform economy. With a little bit of help, you'll be able to identify this. So companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram in their pre-meta days and the like, were able to use and leverage their existing digital tools, and they were able to elevate it to a different level. So they offer opportunities. And now, because of how they have expanded and have been adopted in the market, you yourself can leverage these existing platforms to be part of the platform economy. So they offer opportunities for two-way collaborative communication from the buyer to the seller. A company that actually did this was GoPro. So they actually, engaged with their consumers and customers and encouraged them to use Instagram and post videos about their adventures taken with their GoPro. And because Instagram was a free device, free service, sorry, and people love to share all of their adventures, this was quite quickly taken up by their customers. So while they were doing this, not only were people sharing with their network what they were up to, but they were also promoting the GoPro. And so by being tagged in the post, there was a lot of just free advertising for GoPro that they wouldn't ordinarily otherwise have been able to have. Some of the other strategies that you may want to look at when you enter a platform economy is to partner up or invest. So you can partner or invest with existing or established platform providers and car manufacturers, as I mentioned earlier, such as Ford, GM, and Jaguar, have actually made very large investments in ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft over the past 5 years, because they see the potential it has and where it's growing and how the industry is changing. So they want to be ahead of the curve in that way. At the moment, these same companies and others are also looking at things like, autonomous vehicles and exploring what that world is going to look like and how they can still be part of it in the future. Also part of the platform economy. And thirdly, you can actually build it yourself. If you have enough time, manpower, and money, you can decide, that this is something that's important for your business. It's a way to revolutionize your business. Apple is one of the best examples of how to cannibalize your own business so that you can continue to be relevant. And what I mean by that is, if you're an Apple fan, you'll forgive me for being a bit crude, but you might have an iPhone 10 today, but in a few years, every year or every second year, you're going to want to change it. So they make their own devices obsolete. And that is the way you can, think about your business so that you can continue to stay relevant. If you decide that this is something that you want to pursue and you're going to want to build your own platform economy, then you need to have a clear vision of what you want. And you may have to develop or build or hire or gather the skills that you will need in order to take your business to this platform economy. You may not have that in your organization at the moment, so it's just something else to be aware of. So General Electric actually began to create their platform economy called Predix, and they said it required new talent throughout the organization, not just in IT. So it's not just a tech thing, because you need people with a certain strategy, a certain thinking, a certain vision to bring this whole thing, to fruition. So it developed new leadership, and culture was designed around understanding their customer base. So there is a bit of a shift in the mindset of the organization when you do decide to move into this platform economy space. I'll now hand over to Ridwaan to take you through some of the key legal issues that organizations see.
Thanks, Rakhee. So as can be seen, depending on your strategy as to how you intend to enter into a platform-based business or into a platform, your legal risks are going to differ. I think the first risk, next slide, please, Rakhee. If we look at again, summarizing what I read on the first slide, there's a myriad of legal risks which apply to organizations, everything from data privacy to employment, to regulatory, to tech, to IP, to tax and M&A structuring, digitization, and the like. We'll go through some of these risks with you. Some of it will be from the perspective of a party intending to set up their own platform, as is the stated intention of all of the large local telcos. Most of the large banks in South Africa as well, they stated an open intention is to become platform players. But we'll also look at it from the perspective of a seller or an app developer as well. We won't necessarily look at it from a consumer perspective, but we are cognizant of the risks and also the benefits to consumers as well in the platform economy. So the starting point of legal risks when it comes to the platform is digitization. Next slide, please, Rob. When we look at a typical journey of the customer experience, the traditional way of customers interacting and buying goods and services has changed considerably. Likewise, marketing has changed considerably. We actually do a full one-day seminar specifically on the slide, which you see on the board, touching on each of these points as you go through digitization of the customer experience. But where the platform economy has a big role to play is things like e-commerce, websites, but also things like social ads, email marketing, pay-per-click, online advertisements, social networks, using influencers and the like. So the digitization of the customer experience has actually forced businesses to reconsider, traditional businesses, to reconsider how do they now interact with their consumers to make the most of the customer journey and the customer experience. Next slide, please. The starting point for any platform play is digitization. Moving to the platform economy should not be seen as the same as just digitizing your business. Yes, you can digitize your business, you can digitize back office processes, you can digitize elements of your business, but that digitization is not necessarily a migration towards the platform economy. For companies, whether you are a seller, whether you are the platform provider, the starting point for digitization is governance. IT is broken down into information and technology, so you must consider both. IT governance remains a board responsibility. And despite the haste of companies wanting to embrace platforms and wanting to be first to market with certain products and goods, it does not derogate from your board of directors' responsibility to ensure that there's sound IT governance followed. A big part of that is you still need to ensure that there's sound procurement and contracting standards in place. We often encounter this very practical challenge with digitization as to balancing legal risk versus this velocity and this need to digitize as fast as possible. And even as a law firm, we've had to innovate the way we offer solutions to clients. So traditionally, when we engaged an IT provider on behalf of a company, we would present them with an 80-page master services agreement, probably another 30, 40 pages of statements of work or scopes of work under it. And that process generally takes several months to conclude. With the migration into the platform or platform economy, companies don't have the luxury of time because the space is fast evolving. New players and entrants are coming to the market quicker and quicker. And companies, platform players especially, want to capitalize and even lock in certain types of technologies and solutions coming through to the market. So this traditional approach doesn't always work. And that is where we've had to develop fast track contracting methods. So we can, for a number of companies, we've developed things something called the digital fast lane or digital enhancement space, where we don't take 3 months to negotiate the contract, but literally from time of inception of instruction to signature, a period of 2 days, sometimes even less passes. So you still can build in or still can factor in your requirements to ensure sound procurement and contracting standards, but without sacrificing or adhering to these standards, but without sacrificing your ability to actually get to market quicker. A big part of any play is part of your platform economy, whether you are an entrant as a seller or whether you are the platform provider, is cybersecurity. Without cybersecurity, there's potential for real damage and consumers lose trust. The moment a consumer loses trust in your platform, that platform is as good as dead. You might as well not have your platform in place. And a big and often overlooked aspect of companies wanting to get to market quick is focusing on cybersecurity. Also, bear in mind that a lot of entrants into the market are not necessarily large established players. So you may be dealing with startups or scale ups who don't have the budget, who don't have the resources to actually afford a lot of or new technology or latest technology when it comes to cybersecurity. And these are some of the things which you would need to factor in as part of your risk assessment. Obviously, with digitization, people are the weakest link, and a big challenge to organizations is training your people. This ties in with your POPI compliance initiatives as well. And then again, we'll go into the data privacy risk separately, but your POPI operator obligations become still quite a relevant point when you are dealing with digitization and moving into a platform. Next slide, please, Rakhee. So the next aspect or the next set of risks which you need to look at as a platform economy provider or even as a seller is digital marketing. The traditional way of marketing doesn't work. These days, digital marketing is everything, and digital marketing is highly regulated. Everything from POPI to the CPA to ECTA to things like phase, and there's a whole host of other legislation which actually impacts on it. As I mentioned at ENS, we actually have a one-day course specifically on all of the regulatory risks facing digital marketers. But as part of embracing a platform, as part of interacting with consumers through digital means, you need to factor in risks such as email marketing, social media marketing. The use of influencers is becoming a really critical part of any company's marketing arsenal, and that raises its own issues. So you need to have sound contracts in place with your influencers. You need to have sound due diligence on your influencers. You also need to ensure that your contracts with your influencers both accord with things like the ARB code, if you are subject to the ARB code, but also to what's best practice out there. Then, as part of platform plays, you may also wish to utilize some more traditional electronic marketing means such as SMS, MMS, or USSD. It still is relevant. Marketers still do use it. And these themselves are regulated by things like the WESPA Code of Conduct and the like. And then with a migration to a platform, online advertising also becomes critical. And that in itself raises a whole host of legal issues, everything from whether you intend to utilize search engine optimization or search engine marketing to whether or not you actually intend to display ads on your specific platform or on your specific website or within your app. Just a quick question, ARB's Advertising Regulatory Board code. I won't go into too much more detail. I do understand that's probably covered elsewhere, but it is a very important thing for marketers to be aware of. It is, however, self-regulated, so it is a voluntary code. It's not binding across the industry, and there's case law to that effect, but it's best practice to follow what the ARB says. And I mean, my advice to clients who actively are involved in advertising on a regular basis, do consider subscribing to the ARB code. I do think it's a really useful risk mitigation tool, and you get a lot of benefit from being a member of the ARB as well. So that's just one of the other risks which companies need to be cognizant of as part of your platform economy play that related to digital marketing. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Another critical issue which companies need to be cognizant of is the employment law risk of migrating to a platform. As your business model shifts and changes, that may necessitate either a reskilling of your workforce, but it also may result in certain types of jobs becoming redundant. So how do you then tackle issues arising from your migration to a platform economy player when it comes to shedding of your workforce? Retrenchments may be a big thing. In certain instances, you may be outsourcing a specific service to a third party, and that may necessitate a transfer of employment. There's also general issues arising or emanating from platform economy plays. One of the big things with the platform economy, because it enables flexible solutions, it also creates the need for a flexible workforce, and things like the gig economy and all of the different legal challenges which arise from that also needs to be factored in. So again, there's a myriad of employment law considerations when you are entering into a platform play, whether as a platform provider or whether as a seller marketing of somebody or leveraging of somebody else's platform. Next slide, please, Rakhee. Then in many instances, you may wish, as part of your collaboration, either as a seller or either as the platform provider, you may wish to engage in joint ventures or other types of collaborations. A lot of the contracts which we've been doing in this place start off either as some form of joint venture initiative between parties, especially if you want there to be some form of exclusivity. Rakhee will touch on the competition issues or concerns later. But there's a real need for them to ensure that you've got proper contracts in place for enabling these JVs, and also to do it in a really, really fast track way. One of our clients' stated intention is they wish to onboard one new entrant into their platform every single day. So you can imagine how many contracts are required. And if your contracts are enabled through joint ventures, you need to ensure that those processes are quite streamlined, they're quite fast. You are able to get to market and meet your commercial objectives, but in a legally sound way as well. Another issue which arises is how do you actually, or you may wish to actually acquire businesses in your platform. So we've engaged on behalf of platform providers, and they found that some of the entrants into their marketplace have so much value that they actually want to acquire the entire business. So that's where your M&A considerations come into play. And a lot of your thinking as a platform player and also as a seller coming into somebody else's platform is, do you want to preempt a future equity purchase? Do you want to preempt a migration from just being a service provider or just an entrant into a person's platform to rather a type of partnership in the form of a JV or some other form of collaboration? And this in itself raises a whole host of issues. Next slide, please, Rakhee. Another important point to consider in structuring your platform is taxation. If you intend for your platform to be cross-border and more than just a play within the borders of the Republic, so you may wish to expand into the rest of Africa or even beyond that, because that's the benefit of digitization and platforms. It enables you to actually create borderless services and have consumers in a whole host of countries. One of the things which you may wish to consider is how are you going to structure your platform business? Do you want to set up an offshore structure, for example, in a country like Mauritius? What about things like income tax? What about things like VAT? Who bears the responsibility for all of this? What about withholding taxes? If you are engaging in the offshoring of any IP, so if you may be an entrant sending IP outside of the borders, this may trigger exchange control requirements. So tax and structuring your platform is extremely important if you are the platform provider. If you are an entrant into a platform, you also may wish to consider where is it best for you to structure or set up your structures. Is it within the borders of South Africa, or do you want to start thinking of expansion into other countries? Do you actually need or want or need an offshore structure to make your offering as tax efficient as possible? So those are just some of the basic legal considerations. Rakhee will now deal with some of the other considerations from a legal perspective. Rakhee.
Thanks, Ridwaan. So I'm sure you're all sitting on the edge of your seats wondering that, there's so many parts to navigate. There's still a few more to go through, but hopefully at the end we'll be able to tie this up for you a little bit more. And we do note the questions coming in. We'll try and get to them towards the end of our session. Thanks so much, and please keep them coming. So regarding some of the other legal considerations, most predominantly is obviously technology and the IP considerations in this. So as I mentioned, when you're setting up your platform economy, it might be something that you would be building yourself, or you might be leveraging someone else's technology and infrastructure to put your platform economy on top of. And so that infrastructure, procuring that infrastructure, considering the ownership of the intellectual property in that platform economy and the like become very important considerations. So, if you're using cloud computing technology, which I think all platform economies do, you want to make sure that you have, really sound contracts with your service providers. I know many organizations have the view that it's that nobody is able to actually negotiate against the large giants in the cloud space, and we're here to tell you that that's incorrect. We've done so many times for many of our clients, and when you're setting up something as important as this, it is really critical that you're able to go to these service providers and get them to meet you halfway on these sorts of projects. Other parts of technology that you want to consider is your procurement process, and Ridwaan did touch on this in quite a bit of detail. Ensuring that you have a separate procurement process for your platform economy, because it is a different process to your existing structures. You do want them to be more streamlined. You want the people that are assisting in these projects to be quite au fait with the technical parts of the platform economy, as well as cognizant of the time pressures that you're under. Unfortunately, in the tech world, everything moves at lightning speed, and we're quite used to that, but not everyone is. So you want to develop systems and processes that protects your organization, that manages your risk and your liability, but it is also very pragmatic. You also want to consider your supplier pipeline and how you go about, appointing your various suppliers, developers, sellers onto your platform. You want to have your due diligence processes in place. You need to manage these suppliers. So in one of the earlier slides, Ridwaan mentioned, for example, that startups might not have the resources to put in place very good cybersecurity, measures in their app. That could be a vulnerability for the entire platform. So, what steps are you going to take to assist and grow your app developers, capability to manage their cybersecurity risk? Not only is it in their interest, but it's in yours as well. So these are the things that you would want to consider as well. Customer management, obviously, we're doing all of this for the customers, for the consumers. You want to have processes in place to ensure that customers are getting the service that they deserve. It's in line with your internal organizational strategy and processes. So you do want to tie all of that together. You want to be developing APIs that make sense, those that allow for easy integration into the platform. You want to have things like terms and conditions dictating how app developers, build their apps. You might want to have, rules around how they use the platform, how they make it available, the technical elements as well as the more security related elements. Then the contracting framework. So there's a number of contracts that you would need to put in place. If you think back to the wheel, you want to have contracts in place with your technology service providers. You want to have contracts in place with your app developers or your sellers. You then want to have the contracts with the consumers. You may want to have specific terms depending on the sellers' apps that they are providing. So you need to really think about that ecosystem and what the contract framework would look like, making sure that you comply with all of the other laws, including consumer protection and the like, as well as protecting your business and your organization. And last but certainly not least, AI is the engine behind all of these platform economies these days, really changing the way in which these the efficiencies of the technologies and the ability of these technologies to really grow to something else. AI is used as a very loose term because there are so many facets to AI, from machine learning and all of the like. So depending on the AI technologies and tools that you want to incorporate into your platform economy, they pose their own risks. So you would have to look at each of those individually and cater for them appropriately. So very broad topic. There's a lot more that we can speak to on technology and IP risk, but just to give you a sense of what the main considerations are. Also extremely topical, something that everyone must be tired of hearing from, especially from us on, is data privacy. As you know, POPIA came into law, fully effect from 1 July of this year, and all organizations have been in their own journeys in gearing up for this new data privacy law. But, as many organizations would know, you would have been on this journey for a few years because of the way the world is moving and, the development of data privacy laws around the world, and the awareness around data subjects about their rights. The platform economy cannot escape it either. So there are many POPIA considerations that you may have to, dive into. For example, whether or not you're triggering other countries' laws, such as the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the data privacy law in the European Union, has extraterritorial effect. So you would want to make sure, or you need to make an assessment. Do you need to comply with the GDPR in facilitating this platform economy? Importantly also is the data sharing principles, and who actually owns the end user or the customer, if you can ever, and that's an academic debate around, owning customers, but the data around that. There would be benefits for everyone in this ecosystem to look at the data, do the analytics and gather so much intelligence around how to improve and take it to the next level. You want to make sure you're doing all of that within the realms of, data privacy laws and the like. Direct marketing, Ridwaan did talk about digital marketing as a whole, but direct marketing is also something you would want to consider. And I did see a question, and it might be a perfect time to just bring it into the conversation. There are currently proposed amendments or draft regulations to the POPIA regulations. One of the ones that is most pertinent is the one around direct marketing. And what we're hoping for, if it stays in its current form, it means the death of Form 4. And if you don't know what I mean, Form 4 is a horrible consent form that the regulator had expected all responsible parties to use in order to obtain consent of data subjects in order to send them direct marketing communications. It really would have meant, taking what I heard yesterday, like a bazooka to someone's business, because that's the impact of using Form 4. Lucky for us, the new amendments or the proposed amendments, which have not yet been accepted or published in final form. But what they suggest is that you don't have to use Form 4. You may choose to use Form 4. So that will really revolutionize how we're thinking about direct marketing, especially in this space. You may also need to do disclosures to data subjects. That's necessary as you process their personal information. There are things like prior authorization that you may want to consider. So if you're processing certain categories of personal information, it may trigger an obligation on you to obtain the information regulator's prior authorization. That will need to be factored into your timeline for launching your platform economy. And then obviously data commercialization and the relevant considerations around that. Moving on to competition, and I won't spend too much time on these slides. As you may know, we are not really, competition lawyers, but just to touch on very briefly, what these might look like. So there are definitely, potential for horizontal concerns, vertical concerns, abuse of dominance. So you can really, trigger and fall flat on your face in this aspect if you don't consider these elements correctly. You may also be aware that the Competition Commission has launched, an inquiry on online intermediation platforms. So there is currently a market inquiry on the go. And, the learnings from that inquiry will have to be considered in the space of the platform economy. All I'll say is, look out for our next or one of our future articles on this, where we'll delve into it in a bit more detail. But just for you to be aware that, these are aspects that also need to be considered in setting up your platform economy or participating in them. From a regulatory perspective, it's very broad. Depending on the industry in which you operate in, different laws will apply. But broadly speaking, we do identify the following that, would necessarily need to be considered. Things like the Consumer Protection Act, the National Credit Act, FICA, FASE, National Payment Systems Act. Depending on, who you are and how you operate, these might really be important for you to consider in your platform economy. In addition to that, there might be specific industry regulations that would impact how you manage your platform. So, there are sub rules on outsourcing. So if you are, if these rules govern you, you may need to have specific kinds of agreements in place with service providers where you do outsource certain functions. There might be, cosmetics regulations that would apply, firearms, liquor. I know that the next session is around that. So, these all will affect you depending on what kind of platform you're setting up. And then also, the new developments around open banking and open finance are also things that you would want to consider in this space. And I think last but not least is naturally, the consumer protection issues. At the end of the day, you are developing products, you're going to be marketing to consumers. They are the ones that are going to be consuming the product. So you need to be thinking about all of the issues that go with it. So for example, from an ECTA perspective, if you are providing electronic transactions to consumers and the like, there are certain disclosures that need to be made to the consumers. They have certain rights, such as cooling off rights and the like, that you also need to give effect to refunds. And you'd have to interrogate as to whether that might be appropriate and how that might affect your model. Similarly, with the Consumer Protection Act, consumers are given very broad rights. There's things around, marketing, when you can contact them, what the rights they have in terms of the product, the warranties, the language that is used in communicating with them, and the like. And then naturally, POPIA also has vast consumer protections for data subjects, and they have also a lot of rights as well. So how do you go about, exercising and ensuring that they are able to exercise their rights in terms of all the consumer protection laws? So from my side, just rounding up, that there are numerous legal considerations in this space. There's nothing that we haven't already started thinking about and can assist you in, delving more into this topic. Ridwaan, from your side?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, I think every single company has to ask themselves the question, how do we embrace the platform economy? Are we going to become a player and set up our own platform, or are we going to leverage off other people's platforms? Depending on how you answer that question, you would need to assess your legal risk accordingly. As I mentioned, in South Africa, all of the major telcos, most of the major banks, even a lot of the large retailers are all have stated very publicly and openly in one form or the other that they intend to become platform players. And if you look at like a company like Macro, somebody sent me a link the other day and showed me Macro are now enabling anybody out there the ability to sell your own products using Macro's platform. And that's a great way to actually encourage and stimulate the South African economy, because it encourages entrepreneurship. It allows very small businesses access to very large markets. One of the questions which was asked earlier on was around how can the informal sector benefit from that? It can tremendously. I'll use my sister as an example. She's got a small cosmetics business. She runs a small retail shop and does most of the sales online. Now that the likes of a Macro are opening up the ability for her to actually place her products on Macro's platform, that actually expands her marketplace, her market size exponentially. And once she's onboarded onto that platform, the ability for her to be able to grow sales and become and compete alongside serious players like traditionally established cosmetic houses, that becomes a reality. So there's a lot of benefit. As Rakhee mentioned, it's win-win-win. There's win for the platform provider, because the platform provider is able to actually sell in inverted commas, other people's products or services without having to incur the expenditure of developing their own products or services. It's a win for the seller or for the app developer because it's an ability to actually access larger markets and larger client bases without having to invest in a lot of the marketing and infrastructure which surrounds setting up your own, for example, e-commerce store, running your own marketing campaigns and like. And it's win for the consumer, because the consumer now is presented with a lot more products and services which they can benefit from. The issues are quite large, and they're quite significant from a legal perspective. And again, it all depends on where you intend to position yourself as a player in the platform economy, and that will help you dictate and determine exactly what your legal risk should be. Again, the question which, and if there's one taking you can take from this discussion is, without even having to consider the legal issues for now, is where is your company positioning itself as part of the platform economy? Are you going to establish your own platform? Have you already started steps to establish your own platform? Or are you actually going to leverage off somebody else's platform? And then from there, you can make the relevant calls and determinations as to what your legal risks should be. We see a few questions there, so I think we can take questions at this stage. Rakhee, unless you've got something else.
No, happy to take questions.
Question from Linda.
Yeah, let's start with Linda. Thank you very much, Ridwaan and Rakhee. Very, very informative. Linda, we'll start with you, and then I'll just go to the ones that are on the chat as well. I think Linda's hand has gone down. I'm not sure if it means that it wasn't a question.
Yeah.
So let's go with that mass smart example, the macro example that you're making. The first question is a platform economy then generally defined as a platform that facilitates a transaction without itself being a party to such a specific transaction?
Well, the question of being a party to the transaction again depends on how you intend to structure yourself as a player in the platform economy. Sometimes you may wish to be seen to be the seller, so you may actually not want your consumers to know that you are selling a third party's product or service, and you want it to be seen as your own branded product or service. Other times you may wish to make it very clear you're making a platform available. It's the ability for your consumers to purchase different products from different service providers. So it's all a question of how you intend to structure yourself. But I think that's where your legal agreements and your overall structuring becomes quite critical. Establishing exactly who you are vis-a-vis your consumer. Are you the seller, or is somebody else the seller? Are you merely somebody who's facilitating the session? Are you an agent? And that's where, again, your contracts become really, really important to be able to define exactly what the extent of your responsibility and liability is towards consumers on the one hand and towards your sellers or app developers on the other hand.
Yeah, thanks. And then there was one, and I think you've answered it partly about opportunities for small businesses in the informal sector. You talked about the huge opportunities that this creates, but then there's a follow-up question to that. Is there a big capex spend requirement, and the compliance thereof? Is it something very, very hard for small companies to come into?
So every platform player will establish its own rules to entry. Some may be a lot more stringent on certain things like cybersecurity. So if you are a bank who has established a platform, you can imagine any party who's entering your ecosystem, you'd want to have very stringent cybersecurity in place. But conversely, if you are, maybe a retailer allowing new entrants to sell products, cybersecurity may not be that big a thing because you really just want to enable your consumers to view the party's product and then make a purchase on your website. So it all depends. There's no one size fits all approach. When it comes to your level of capex, the benefit of being an entrant into somebody else's platform is your ability to get to a very wide and vast consumer base, and you have the backing of a large player and an established brand name backing your product. And that takes away a lot of the need to incur expenditure when it comes to things like marketing and setting up your own sales channels and the like.
Yeah, thank you. And then you talked about influencers. And the issue of vicarious liability, well, does it apply where influencers are concerned? Because most of them come through to these agents that you don't go to them directly, who therefore becomes liable in that kind of thing should something go wrong.
So that's where your contract with your influencers and the agents become absolutely critical. It's actually speaking exactly to those points. Who bears liability? Who bears responsibility? Is it the agency? Is it the influencer? Is it the consumer? Oh, sorry. Is it the advertiser? Ultimately, if you are leveraging off a consumer's social media account and that consumer is marketing your product, more than the legal liability, I think one of the bigger questions which companies must ask themselves is the reputational exposure for something that goes wrong with that influencer. And again, that's where your proper vetting of your influencers becomes critical. When we do training on digital marketing, one of the articles that we make available to our audience is verifying that your influencer is who they say they are, verifying that their follower base is actually a valid and legitimate follow base and they've not gone out and bought followers from somewhere. And we've read certain studies which suggest that sometimes up to 50% and even more influencers actually find a way of inflating their follower base through artificial means. So your due diligence is absolutely critical. Your contract that becomes also your next critical risk management mitigator.
Thanks, Ridwaan. Lastly, you touched very briefly on the issue of the ARB. I'm sure most people on this call be aware of the audio and audiovisual content services draft bill that was issued at the beginning of this year. As the Consumer Goods Council, made written and oral submissions, and the issue of self-regulation and regulation on advertising content was discussed at length in that document. And we did say, as the Consumer Goods Council, that self-regulation is best, because in the absence of self-regulation, you get regulated by ICASA. So we hear that the audiovisual content might become law next year in around March. And I think I want to emphasize what you said about the issue of self-regulation, to say that let's support those self-regulatory bodies. As the Consumer Goods Council, we did an exercise in the last 2 to 3 months where we looked at the best regulatory mechanism, self-regulatory mechanism, who is the best body to do it. We even considered the consumer goods ombuds as an alternative to doing so. Currently, we found out that they do not have the powers to do that. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but they would have to have those legislative powers given to them. But as things stand, we are recommending that, organizations do look at the ARB, because if it comes to March and the government is aware that the industry is not supportive of the self-regulatory mechanism, it could be that we're forced to look at government or ICASA regulation, which may not be ideal in this instance. So yeah, I just wanted to echo those sentiments that you shared earlier.